Hello, students. This week's topic in early childhood education is outdoor play and learning in early childhood education. Let's jump in. We started off this week's lesson in class with some students sharing, asking the following questions. When you were younger, think about it, where or how did you spend your free time? What memories do you have of playing outside? As a high school student, how would you describe how you spend your downtime? Do you spend it inside, outside? What do you do with your downtime? Two more questions. What do you see as some possible benefits of children playing outside? And finally, what do you see as some possible reasons why children may spend less time outside in today's culture? We're going to start off this teaching with a few quotes on outdoor play. First quote, kids don't remember their best day of television. So what do you think that quote might mean? Second quote, children cannot bounce off the walls if we take away the walls. Next quote, let the children play, stomp in puddles, climb trees, dig in the dirt, go on a bug hunt, make mud pies, roll down a hill, build a cubby, make a daisy chain, create a garden for fairies. Playing outside makes children smarter, healthier, and happier. Two more quotes. There is no such thing as bad weather, only inappropriate clothing. And finally, the original PlayStation. Get real, get outside. Picturing a swing set in a backyard. The original PlayStation. As an introduction to outdoor play, I want to share a few things with you. First of all, I want to look at what are some of the goals of outdoor play. First of all, it's exercise for children's bodies. Children's minds and bodies are developing at a very rapid pace, and it's helpful for their bodies to have exercise to help their muscles and their organs develop fully. Large muscle, gross motor development. So while we're inside, we're going to develop some large muscle, but we're going to develop it more when we're outside running, jumping, climbing, skipping, pedaling, etc. So large muscle development happens mostly while we're outside playing. Another benefit of outdoor play is that children develop various skills. They develop the skills of kicking, climbing, running, jumping, throwing, catching, balancing, pedaling, skipping, galloping, and much more. These are skills that we're not born knowing how to do, but we need to practice them to learn them and perfect them. So skill development happens during outdoor play. Children also benefit from fresh air and sunshine. Sunshine, when we protect ourselves from getting burned, it helps to regulate our day. It helps us to sleep better at night. It helps to improve our mood. Science exploration happens outside. Outside is where we can learn about how plants grow, about shadows, about sunshine, about heat, about cold, about rain, about puddles, about evaporation. Lots of things we can learn about science while we are exploring outside. Some additional goals. Socializing with peers. Kids really get to play with each other outside and get to work on those socialization skills of just communicating with each other, sharing, cooperating, negotiating, etc. Having fun, kind of skip through that one, but that's a big thing that happens outside. And a lot of our memories, a lot of my favorite memories from being young is having fun while playing outside. Next one is developing a lifelong love for wellness and fitness. Many of the habits that we create as young children may go along with us as we get older. So if children learn to love wellness, fitness, exercising, playing outside, exploring nature, etc., then they are more likely to develop a lifelong love for those things as they get older. Another benefit of outdoor play is it prepares students for participating in sports and wellness activities. So a lot of students as they get older may play baseball, softball, soccer, etc. So when we're younger and we're learning kind of discrete skills, we're learning things that are going to help us to participate in sports and wellness activities as we get older. Next, we're going to look at some ingredients or some elements of outdoor learning environments. So what are the things that we would want to see in an outdoor learning environment, like a playground? First of all, we want to see ample space for groups of children to move and engage in play with equipment. So we want to have a lot of space so kids can really run and move and run fast. We don't want to have a really crowded space where children can't do this, but we want a very ample, very adequate, very excellent space for children to move and engage. We want to have a variety of age-appropriate equipment. We want to see both movable equipment, such as balls and soccer goals and bikes and hula hoops, as well as stationary equipment, such as balance beams, climbers, etc. We want to see that the outdoor play space is designed and supervised for safety of children. So it's very important that when a playground is designed, that somebody really who understands safety and understands safety requirements designs it so they can make sure to design it well as to be a safe playground. It's also important after a playground is installed that teachers and parents and guardians supervise children to help children to be safe. One part of designing and building a playground is to put ample cushioning below climbing equipment. Underneath climbing equipment and around climbing equipment is what is called the use zone, also known as the fall zone. So we want to have cushioning below, so if a child falls, they will not incur a serious injury. Pictured on this next slide is an example of a fall zone. So we see a climber up above with a slide, a couple slides, 3 or 4 slides coming down. And then at the bottom, we see some pour in place rubber. So this is designed to absorb any impact from a child falling from a height onto this. So it's going to help the child to not experience any serious injury if they were to fall onto this resilient surfacing. The next ingredient, you want to have multiple play surfaces. You want to have hard surfaces for playing with wheeled vehicles and balls, such as concrete or asphalt. You want to have soft surfaces for running, such as grass or artificial turf. And you want to have cushion surfaces, like we just looked at, to be underneath climbing equipment. Various things can be used for cushioning under climbing equipment, such as mulch from trees, crushed rubber, poured in place rubber, synthetic turf with cushioning underneath it. So a lot of different things can be used to provide cushioning to help falls not to be too dangerous. You want to make sure that the playground is easily supervised visually by teaching staff. So we want to make sure that staff are such that they can see everything that's going on the playground. And what I used to like to do is to train my staff to play zones where the teachers were not next to each other, where they would only see the same group of children. Rather, they were spread out on the playground, each of them covering a zone or kind of a visual perimeter of what they were watching, so they could have a zone that they were watching. Sometimes we also need to provide one-on-one supervision for a child. So if a child is on a climbing ladder, for example, we'd want to be one-on-one with them to provide supervision and be ready to spot them if they slip or begin to fall. Another ingredient of some good outdoor play spaces are that it includes convenient features such as shade. You always want to have shade on the playground. If you're building a new playground and there are no trees around, you can have shade canopies over the various pieces of equipment to provide children some shade from the bright sunlight. You want to have storage, easily accessible storage, where bikes and balls and things like that can be stored. It's very nice and helpful if you can have water up there, perhaps a water fountain. If you don't have a water fountain, you could have a container up there that you could have water so children could drink water from. It's nice when bathrooms are easily accessible. If you don't have bathrooms on the playground, you want it to be adjacent to the building, so children that need to use the restroom, you can take them in and use it. It's also nice when they're very accessible to the classroom, so that children can just go right out along with their teachers when they want to, without needing to pass through other classrooms or disturb other people. I worked at a child care in Rockford when I was learning to be a teacher, and we actually had a courtyard right next to our classroom, and we had enough staff all the time where we could have one teacher be outside on the playground with children in the courtyard and other children be inside. So this was a really neat feature where children really got to choose if they wanted to be outside or inside throughout the day. Some additional ingredients of good outdoor spaces. You want the outdoor space to be accessible for children, teachers, parents, guardians with mobility challenges. So if you have a child in a wheelchair, you want them to be able to go different places on the playground and access the equipment. Sometimes the equipment will be built with what is called a transfer station, where a child in a wheelchair who is able to be mobile outside of the wheelchair would be able to pull the wheelchair up and then perhaps with some assistance slide out of the wheelchair onto the climber, and then they can move around that way. So we want to make sure that things are accessible, both as far as equipment as well as the ground cover that you have, so that children and teachers and parents with disabilities are able to move around and explore the playground. You'll also want to make sure that your playground is protected from outside hazards. So it's very essential that playgrounds have a fence around it to keep children inside, but you also want to make sure that you've got protection from traffic, from unsafe substances, glass, animals, etc. So you really want to make sure that the playground it doesn't have anything where something from outside is going to hurt children. Some playgrounds that are near a road or near a parking lot actually have something called bollards installed, and these are kind of like the things that you would see outside of Walmart, except there are many more of them, and these are just very solid steel things with concrete in the middle that would prevent a car from coming into the playground and hurting children. Unsafe substances, this could be various things that might get thrown on a playground. If the playground is in a kind of a city area where people go by and might throw things in, you might have a playground also where people might throw bottles in at night or on the weekends. So we want to make sure that we are trying to protect the children inside the playground from hazards from outside of the playground. You also want to make sure that a good outdoor play space is well maintained. So teachers should make daily checks of the playground before children even go out. So just a walk through the playground to make sure that the gates are closed, make sure that there's nothing dangerous out there that you need to keep away from children. So do a daily check, also to do some weekly checks, maybe a little more in-depth checking to make sure things are fine, and also to do monthly checks. When I was at the Early Childhood Center, we did a monthly check where we actually took a paper checklist out with us, and that checklist had different things that we were looking for to make sure that the playground was in good repair for children's use. So we need to make sure we do those checks. Then we also need to make sure that the playground is maintained well. So it's mowed regularly, sidewalks are cleared from snow, that sort of thing. So those are some of the ingredients of good outdoor play spaces. Another one is access to water for water play in warm weather. So children love to play in the water when it's warm, and if we can provide a nice source of water, that is a really good thing for children to have. Also, as we're going to see, some playgrounds may have a mud kitchen, so water would be essential for that as well. A few more ingredients. Space and materials for different types of play. You want to make sure that you have a lot of different things out there other than climbing equipment and balls, but you want to have things for dramatic play. Perhaps some kids are going to pretend that a dramatic play vehicle is a fire truck, so you might want to have some fire helmets and fake fire extinguishers and that kind of stuff. You want to have stuff for creative play and art. We're going to see some pictures shortly of some easels where children could paint on easels while they're outside. You may want to add manipulatives, might want to add music, lots of things like that, just so children can have a lot of different play experiences while they're enjoying the outdoors. I would encourage you, if you're ever in a position to do so, to consider offering an outdoor classroom. An outdoor classroom is a place where children can do everything outside that they would be able to do inside. At the Early Childhood Center, when I was there, we were working on developing an outdoor classroom, so we had some tables outside where we were able to enjoy snacks or do art on. We also had some musical instruments where children could engage in music outside. We also had a dramatic playhouse where we could pretend it's a house, we could pretend it's a fire station, we could pretend it's a restaurant, whatever we wanted to do. So we were able to do a lot of dramatic play, artistic play, etc. while we were outside. Another thing you want to do when you're looking at a playground, deciding if it's good, is ask yourself the question, is this playground age appropriate? A toddler playground for ones and twos is going to look very different than a playground that's designed for elementary age children. So you really want to make sure that the playground where children are going to play is made for them, not for older or younger children. Next, what we're going to do is do what I'm calling a tour of early childhood playgrounds, then and now. So we're going to look at a bunch of pictures representing different playgrounds. First of all, let's take a look at some old-fashioned playgrounds. So places where your parents may have played, places where I played when I was younger. So pictured here in the back is a great big swing set, and in the front is a merry-go-round. So I remember the merry-go-round well. Some kids would be standing on it, other kids would be on the outside running around making this thing go as fast as you could. So it was kind of a fun experience, but also kind of a scary experience because you really had to hold on so you wouldn't go flying off. One thing I want to note with these pictures is it's dirt beneath the pictures. So dirt can be unforgiving, dirt can be very hard. So definitely not resilient surfacing used in this picture. This is a very old picture of some ladders and some rings and things like that. But again, you see not resilient surfacing down below, just something that would be kind of hard if somebody were to fall on it. An old-fashioned teeter-totter. Again, it looks kind of fun, and it is kind of fun unless somebody falls off and falls on the hard surface below. Here's some old-fashioned bucket swings. We actually still have bucket swings today, but one thing to point out below is that they're kind of just dirt or maybe gravel. The gravel kind of gets worn away, so not a lot of protection if you were to fall off a swing like this. And then I found this picture of some really long slides, really high slides. So these kind of make me a little bit nervous because if a child were at the very top and fell off, they would be falling probably 12, 15 feet, something like that. So, and I also note that the slides are made of metal. If these are facing the wrong way, the sun is going to shine on these and they're going to get really hot and potentially burn a child. So those were a few pictures of some old-fashioned. Here's another one, kind of a jungle gym. Monkey bars, we used to call these as well. So kind of a fun thing to climb on, but again, it doesn't have much cushioning below if a child were to fall. Now we're going to take another look at some more modern playgrounds that are commercially made, and that these are things that you might find at childcare centers or schools. So this one is a pretty cool looking one. We'll see the shade canopy above because there's not a lot of mature trees around there and you want to provide shade for the kids using it. The slides here are made out of plastic, so not going to get as hot if the sun were to be shining on them. We also see at the lower right here is a transfer deck, and this is that place where a wheelchair could pull up and a child could get off the wheelchair if they were able to do so. We also see beneath this, it looks like grass, but it's really an astroturf kind of thing, kind of a synthetic grass, not really grass, but more of a plasticky kind of grass. And underneath that is rubber fill so that it provides cushioning when you're walking on it and if you happen to fall off of it. So that is one example of a more modern day playground. Another one shown here, kind of a neat looking thing. It's got a few different slides coming off of it. It has a little arched climber over on the right where kids can access it to get up there. You'll note on these climbers, they're no longer 15 feet off the ground like they were before, because that's not really necessary. And when you go up that high and have a fall, it could be a very serious fall. So these are much closer to the ground. We also see on the back side some kind of handbars where a child would be able to walk hand over hand, different ways of getting up, different ways of getting down. Another one under a shade canopy. Some things that I note about this one, it has a double slide facing us, and the double slide is fun because two kids can slide together. This one for the ground surfacing, it looks like it has perhaps some shredded tires that's sometimes used. It's good because it's cushioning. The bad part about it is it can get really hot because it's black, and when the sun shines on it, it gets hot. So again, we see different ways of getting up. On this side, next to the double slide, we see a perceptual motor wall or a rock climbing wall. So that's kind of a neat way for kids to get up onto the climber. And again, if they were to fall backwards, they're going to fall on the resilient surfacing and probably be pretty safe. Another picture of that same climber, just showing some different ways of getting up, as well as we see the spiral slide here, so a fun way of getting down. More of a toddler-sized climber at another place, so has a double slide again, a little curved slide. On the far side, you might see 6 little blocks, and this is kind of a neat way because the child puts a foot on one side and a hand on the other side, and they climb up that way. And this is actually a very good way to climb for supporting brain development, because whenever we use the right side of our body, the left side of our brain controls that, and vice versa. So when they're using their right hand and their left hand and their right foot and their left foot together, together, they're actually using their entire brain and coordinating between the different sides of their bodies. So kind of a nerdy thing, but something I wanted to share about this one. This is another climber. Here we see some swings. The swings are pretty low to the ground, so the child isn't going to get going really high, but they're going to be able to enjoy that swinging experience and develop the balance that comes from swinging. We see this one has wood mulch underneath it, so when you're having wood mulch, it has to be a certain depth to make sure that if a child falls on it, it's going to provide the cushioning that they need in that resilient surfacing. Again, we see a double slide here, just a bunch of different fun things for kids to do on that climber. This is a picture of that same climber, and on this side we see another one of those perceptual motor walls. So they're going to figure out and kind of map the way they're going to climb it with their hands and their feet. I had one of these at the Early Childhood Center here at Kishwaukee College, and this was wonderful for children. They had to really not just climb, but they had to think of what they were going to do next. A lot of problem solving went into this. A lot of just really advanced thinking went into figuring out how they were gonna scale that wall. Pictured here is a tire swing. It's one of the swings that kids really love to ride in. So very low to the ground, but it lets them get some good fun movement. Another double slide here, very popular element. And we see a little bridge here at the top. So a neat place where they can cross, they can look over the railing, they can see their friends. You'll notice that the railing is pretty tall, needs to be at least 42 inches tall to keep somebody from inadvertently falling over it. And we also see that the gap between the different bars is less than 3.5 inches, so that a head won't fit through there. So when you're designing a playground, all these things need to be considered. Another playground design. This one has some big side panels made of some kind of a plastic substance, and they have some kind of flowery things in them, so kind of a neat appearance. And you also note just how tall those sides are. So a child going down the slide is not going to be able to easily fall off the side of the slide. This one again has a pour in place, so this one is kind of a rubbery mixture that's liquidy when it goes down, and then it dries to be a resilient surfacing. This one is another more of a toddler size playground. So it's very low to the ground, has a transfer panel right here. On this side, has a few different slides, provides the shade that you would want. And then we see around this one, a nice fence around it to make sure that the kids are staying inside the playground where they're safe and protected. So we just looked at some kind of more traditional playgrounds, featuring slides and swings and ladders and steps. Now we're going to look at some different things that you'll find on more modern, less traditional playgrounds. So pictured here is a bike path. It's kind of a small bike path, but it gives kids a place to ride around. The little lines are drawn there so kids can kind of learn the rules of the road, learn how to be safe. We also see a stop sign there. We see it protected by some sun canopies, etc. So a riding path is a really nice thing to have as part of a playground. This picture here features a little bridge over what looks like water. It's not really water, it's just what they poured in place to give it a neat appearance. But kids would love to go back and forth over that bridge. The bridge here doesn't have to have any kind of spindles on the side, because if a child went off the bridge, they're only going down about a foot or so. So we only have to have rails when something is really elevated off of the ground. In this one, we see different kind of structures here. We see a vet clinic in the background, outfitter here, market here. So this playground is really designed for some dramatic play. a close-up picture of that vet clinic, so not really sure exactly how fun that's going to be. Depends on what you put behind it, but this playground, when they designed it, they must have really wanted to have a lot of dramatic play options. I wanted to include this picture to show that it's good to have little tables on the playground. So this could be a place where kids eat snack, where kids do art, where you have manipulatives, things like that for kids to enjoy. Here are some outdoor art easels. So they're made such that paper can attach to the plastic panels in the back, and children can go ahead and paint while they're outside. What a fun experience. This picture is an outdoor sandbox. Sand play is something that children love, love, love. So this one has a back wall that has some stuff that you could pour sand through. At the Early Childhood Center, we actually had a magnetic wall behind it, and then we had a lot of different chutes and things like that that we could attach to the magnet wall, and kids could pour sand in, and we could watch how the sand would cascade from one chute to another. This is a little xylophone type thing for a playground. I don't know where the little sticks are for playing the music. They're not in the holes, but it's fun for children to be able to enjoy music outside, and outside as well. They can make as much noise as they want to, and you would welcome that noise because you're outside. Another picture here from a different manufacturer. This is showing water play. So there's this wonderful water play table. You could pour water in the upper table and have it go down to the lower table. So a lot of fun things that kids could do while playing in this kind of a water table outside. Pictured here is another kind of sand table on the left, and then a mud kitchen on the right. So kids get to mix up mud, put it in pans, and explore that way. So we've just looked at some more modern playgrounds. I also want to share with you some nature playgrounds that are more of a recent thing that people are installing at their child care centers and at their schools. So we're going to look at this. A nature playground wants to make it not real commercially looking, but really make it look like nature. So this has a little thing where a child could go from this lower area, get up to the grassy area by climbing this little perceptual motor wall and then going onto the grassy area. This in the background, we see a nice long slide that comes down, and then we see a couple different ways of getting up it. A child can walk over on the left here and go up steps in a more traditional way, or the child could scale the rocks right there. So a nature playground is more like it would be to play out in nature. There may be a little more risk involved, but risk is not always a bad thing, because when children take risk, they learn what an appropriate risk is and what a dangerous risk is. Another thing that I wanted to note on this slide is the slide goes down, and then down at the bottom it has this little leveling out, and this is to kind of slow the child down before they discharge from the slide. So that is one of the elements that are important to have in slides. More of this nature playground. So it looks like maybe some sand here. In the back here is kind of a rock climbing wall where the kids can climb up. This is showing that same slide again. So there are several different ways to get up to the top of that slide so you can slide back down. So kind of a neat thing, kind of built into a hill on this playground. Another thing, kind of similar to nature playgrounds, are loose parts. Loose parts are really a big thing now, where children kind of create their own challenges. So pictured here is a pallet with a lot of planks of wood on it, some some logs, some thin logs called tree cookies, but kids can make their own climbing equipment out of this. Some burlap bags there that have smaller pieces of wood in it, so maybe this bin back here, some rocks in it, so really adventurous kids can build some creative things, and then they can climb on the things that they have made. This is another picture just showing loose parts. So this school has a bunch of different things. Looks like a big tire inner tube and some various tubing and boxes and things like that. So kids are creating using the loose parts. Next, I want to show briefly some examples of movable equipment. So much of what we looked at so far as the climbers and things like that, are stationary equipment that's stuck in the ground, not going to move around. Movable, movable equipment would include bikes like this and trailers like this. So this was a favorite at the Early Childhood Center. Kids could really move on these bikes, and another child could ride in the trailer. We actually had some bikes similar to this, except they had a front seat and a back seat on them, so somebody could give another child a ride. Parachute is another fun movable activity where kids can play games together using a parachute. Pictured here are a bunch of different balls, and the different balls have different textures. The different textures actually make it easier to catch the ball. So as a child is learning the throwing and catching skill, it's really nice to use balls like this because it makes it easier for them to master those skills of throwing and catching. Pictured here is a balance beam that could be constructed in different ways. This is something you could use inside your classroom as well as outside. And then one more piece of movable equipment, just some little golf clubs and a little hole. So we had these at the Early Childhood Center, and a lot of fun for kids to play with inside and outside. Needed some good supervision to make sure they were using them safely, but a nice piece of movable equipment for children to use and enjoy. We are wrapping up here. I want to talk a little bit about playground safety. In the in-class version, we're going to watch a couple of videos on playground safety. And then we're going to talk about what teachers can do to check the playground for safety. So first of all, you want to make sure that there's an appropriate use zone, which is that cushioning that you have underneath climbing equipment. So you want to make sure it's the right material. You want to make sure the material is at the proper depth. There's an agency of our federal government called the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and they have done all kinds of research, and they state how deep materials must be to provide adequate cushioning for a fall from different heights. So depending on how tall your climber is, determines how deep your cushioning material needs to be. The Consumer Product Safety Commission also states how far away from equipment that the use zone must extend. So when you're talking about swings, the use zone is very big because it needs to not be only under the swings, but needs to be behind the swing as well as in front of the swing in case a child were to fall off in either way. Few more things. You want to make sure that there are no head entrapments. A head entrapment is simply a couple pieces of stationary material next to each other, like bars or parts of stairs where a head might get trapped. So vertical bars have to be less than 3.5 inches together because a head will not fit through that, or more than 10 inches to avoid head entrapment. So just an example of what this Consumer Product Safety Commission looks for. Railing heights, as I mentioned earlier, have to be specified so that the child does not go over a railing. So very specific heights are used. And as I showed earlier, slides need to have a run out at the end of the slide to ease the child's smooth exit from the slide. You don't want it just to be a straight slide because then the child is going to hit the ground going really fast. Rather, you want that run out at the end to slow the child down. You want to make sure that all children on our playground are visible to at least one teacher at all times. So again, playing zones on the playground is important for teachers. Here we say that teachers should play zones where they're strategically placed so that all areas of the playground and all children on the playground can be seen. Another thing that I really had my teachers do at the Early Childhood Center is to spot climbers. So if a child were going up one of those perceptual motor walls where they have to move their hands and move their feet to make it up, we always made sure that a teacher was standing behind them with their hands poised to catch that child or to support that child if they need some assistance. Another thing on safety supervision, teachers should be engaged in play and supervision with children. Playground time is not break time or conversation time. Sometimes when you get outside, you think, this is a time to kick back and relax. But actually, it's a time where you need to engage more and supervise more because the risk is greater on a playground than it is inside a classroom. Another thing, teachers should count children regularly. Before you leave the building, do out to the playground. While you're on the playground, count children. When you go inside, count children. I did have an instance one time where one child decided to hide when we went inside. So had we not been good counters, we would not have known that that child was hiding. So we had to have all the children and teachers go into one room and be together, and then the rest of us went and searched the playground to find the hiding child. But again, had we not counted, we might not have noticed that that child was missing. Another thing that good teachers do with supervision is they anticipate what might go wrong and help it not to happen. So I'm constantly looking around the playground. If I see that let's say a balance beam is starting to have the beam fall off the little feet on the end of it, I would anticipate that that might fall off and a child might get hurt. So before that could happen, I would go over and I would fix the balance beam. So anticipate and correct. Teachers should continuously be on the lookout for any equipment issues and make sure to report them if they are found. Teachers should carefully monitor children's use of movable equipment too, watching for unsafe behavior. So you can design a super safe playground, but if kids aren't using it appropriately as it was designed, then danger can happen. So you want to monitor children's use of all equipment on a playground. Teachers should balance risk-taking with safety. So children need to learn by taking risk. So if we never take a risk, we never know what's safe and what's not safe. So children really need to learn about taking risk, but they need to learn to make good judgment about what is a safe risk and what is a dangerous risk. So teachers, our role is to make sure that risks are not too big where they might result in a serious injury of a child. Another thing teachers need to do is be aware of children's clothing, making sure that children do not have drawstring hoods or other items that may get caught in equipment. There have been documented cases of children sliding down a slide with a hood um, with a string for closing the hood, and that string gets caught at the very top of the slide. The child's body weight goes down the slide, and this has caused the child to get strangled by the string. So you want to make sure that kids don't have strings on hoods. They shouldn't because they have been outlawed for many years, but just need to be conscious of that and aware of such hazards. This really isn't a supervision issue, but just an encouragement issue. Teachers should be intentional when interacting with children, helping children to learn the various skills such as kicking, catching, pedaling, jumping, etc. So when teachers are out on the playground, they're looking at the equipment that's available, they're looking at the children, and they're helping kids to learn things. I used to love to play catch with children, and I would really help them learn how to do it. I would help them by showing them how to put their hands, and we would call that the catching position. So they would get their hands in the catching position. I would toss the ball straight to the catching position, and they would catch it. Once they got the catching position down, then I could throw the ball not quite as accurately, and they would be able to move their hands a little bit to catch the ball. So I was very intentional about helping children learn how to catch and throw a ball. Another playground option that I'm not going to go into depth here in this presentation are group games. In the Early Childhood Center where I worked and where I've worked before, we didn't do a lot of group games. We really set up the learning environment and children learn through that environment. But in older grades, you might have group games. I have shown some books here that have large motor games, the joy of movement, and things like that. So group games are perfectly acceptable. Sometimes kids have a really hard time understanding rules of group games. So group games are one option for doing on playgrounds as well. So in closing, just want to summarize what we've learned. We started off today with some students sharing about our own play experiences growing up. We talked about some goals of outdoor play, just how children can benefit from outdoor play. We talked about the ingredients or the elements of good outdoor play spaces. We took a visual tour of some playgrounds. We looked at some old-fashioned playgrounds, some modern commercial playgrounds, some nature playgrounds, and we looked at loose parts as well. We took a few looks at some mobile equipment such as balls and things like that, parachute, that kind of stuff. We talked a little bit about playground safety and the role that teachers play in helping kids to be safe on the playground. And finally, we hit upon group games. That is the end of this teaching on outdoor play and learning. Thank you for playing along.